The phone rang while I was arranging hydrangeas on my kitchen counter. My daughter-in-law's voice came through, flat and cold. He's long gone. We already buried him. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My only son, gone. And I hadn't even been told until it was too late. No call from the hospital, no warning, no chance to hold his hand. Just a sentence delivered like an afterthought. My name is Lucinda Vale, and in that instant, I realized something worse than death had happened. I'd been erased from my son's last moments, erased from his funeral, erased from the life we once shared. That was the wound that cut deeper than grief itself. And it was only the beginning of the truth I was about to uncover. The shears slipped from my hand and clattered onto the patio stones. I stood frozen, the phone pressed to my ear as Nola's words settled into the silence of my kitchen. He's long gone. We already buried him. Her tone carried no tremor, no grief, just the clipped efficiency of someone crossing off a task. A wave of nausea swept through me. Blaine, my only son, had been recovering from surgery just last week. The doctor had said he was stable. My voice broke as I asked, "Why didn't you call me? Why wasn't I told?" Nola's sigh was impatient, dismissive. "Maybe you didn't pick up. Doesn't matter now. It's done." The room spun. I staggered back inside, clutching the counter for balance, and dialed the hospital where I thought Blaine had been admitted. After an eternity of tinny hold music, a woman finally answered, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but there's no record of a Blaine Vale in our system." My throat closed. That can't be right. He had surgery here last week. Dr. Henderson was his surgeon. A pause. Then the quiet reply, "We don't have a Dr. Henderson on staff." The phone nearly slipped from my grip. Either I had been wrong all along, or someone had hidden his records. My fingers trembled as I tried one last desperate call to the local funeral home. "Peterson Funeral Home. How may I help you?" "I need to confirm a service. My son, Blaine Vale." "Oh yes," the woman said warmly. "The arrangements are complete. Private, closed casket. Immediate family only. Will you be providing the flowers?" "I'm not his wife," I cut in. "I'm his mother." The line went silent. At last she spoke, voice hushed. I'm terribly sorry. Your daughter-in-law told us you wouldn't be attending. She said you preferred to grieve privately." My knees buckled. The phone dangled uselessly from its cord as I pressed a hand to my mouth, trying to swallow the sob clawing its way up my throat. The hydrangea stems I'd been holding lay bruised across the counter, their petals curling under my trembling fingers. My son was gone, and I hadn't just been denied a chance to say goodbye, I had been erased from it altogether. My hands shook as I scrolled down the funeral home's website, hoping to find something concrete, something to anchor me in this nightmare. Instead, my stomach turned to ice. There it was, Blaine's obituary, his name, his dates, and under the line where his surviving mother should have been listed, it wasn't me. Some other name sat there, a stranger in my place, as if I'd never given birth to him at all. The words blurred on the screen as I blinked through tears. I forced myself to dial the funeral home, desperate to believe it was a misprint. A woman's voice answered politely, but the moment I gave my name, her tone shifted. There was hesitation, a pause heavy enough to fill the whole room. I'm sorry, Mrs. Vale. Your daughter-in-law informed us you wouldn't be attending. She said you preferred to grieve privately." The phone nearly slipped from my damp palm. My throat closed as I tried to respond, but only a rasp came out. I hung up before my sobs could reach her ears. My son's death had already stolen him from me. Now even the record of his life was being rewritten to erase me completely. That evening, I found myself in Blaine's old bedroom, a place I hadn't entered in years. The air was still thick with memories, his baseball trophies lined up on a crooked shelf, his college diploma hanging in a frame that tilted slightly, just as he had left it before moving out. I lowered myself onto the edge of his bed, the same one where he had once sprawled out with textbooks and late-night snacks, and opened the old calendar I kept tucked in the nightstand. Page after page was filled with neat handwriting, little reminders of visits I had planned. March 15th, drive down to see Blaine. Next to it, written later in faint ink, canceled, Nola not feeling well. April, June, August. Each time I had circled dates for birthdays, holidays, weekends, and beside nearly every one of them, a note of cancellation, almost always accompanied by Nola's name or excuse. The truth hit me like a slow avalanche, crushing and undeniable. What I had brushed off as bad timing, work conflicts, or simple misunderstandings had been a pattern all along. My hands traced the ink on the page, as if touching those words could somehow give back the moments I had lost. Each cancellation had cut me out of Blaine's life a little more, until one day, I'd been erased completely. In that bedroom, surrounded by his trophies and photos, I realized the obituary hadn't simply gotten my name wrong. It reflected the reality Nola had carefully built over the years. Piece by piece, she had rewritten my role in Blaine's life until even the world believed I no longer belonged there. And now, with my son gone, I had no way to confront him about what he knew or what he believed. The silence in that room pressed in on me like a weight, making it hard to breathe. I clutched the calendar to my chest and closed my eyes, the pain sharper than any knife. I wasn't just grieving Blaine's death. I was grieving the slow, quiet theft of my place in his life, a theft so complete that even his final farewell denied me my name. Days passed with silence pressing down on me, every unanswered call and closed door a reminder that I was on the outside of my own son's death. Desperation drove me to the house of a neighbor who had always been kind, someone who had known Blaine since he was little. She listened quietly as I stumbled through my questions, then disappeared into her living room and returned with a small flash drive. "You should see this," she whispered. That night, in the dim light of my kitchen, I opened the file on my laptop. The screen flickered, and then, there they were, Blaine and Nola, standing on their porch in the glow of the porch light. My son's face was taut with anger, his hands gesturing sharply. His voice cracked through the speakers, raw and desperate. "Mom has the right to know. I'm calling her tomorrow, no matter what you say." The words slammed into me with the force of a storm. Tears blurred my vision as I clutched the edge of the table. He hadn't abandoned me. He had still wanted me. All those years of second-guessing myself, of wondering if I'd smothered him, if I'd somehow driven him away, they crumbled in an instant. The truth was there, captured by a neighbor's doorbell camera. Before I could gather my thoughts, my phone rang. The name on the screen made my pulse jump. Nola. Her voice was nothing like the controlled, icy woman who had announced Blaine's death. She was trembling, on the edge of panic. "What did you do? Why are you trying to destroy me? The probate lawyer called me. He said there's a problem with the estate. Blaine changed something. Some papers. Why would you do this?" I sat frozen. I hadn't contacted a lawyer. I hadn't even thought about wills or assets. I'd been consumed with just finding where my son was buried. Her words spilled out fast. Ragged. "Don't play dumb with me, Lucinda. You must have known. He changed the will, didn't he?" The room tilted again. The same sickening lurch I'd felt the night of her first phone call. This time, though, the ground beneath her seemed to be shifting too. Nola was unraveling. And for the first time, I realized Blaine had prepared for this. The next morning, I walked down the narrow brick sidewalks of our town's main street, heart pounding with every step. The office of David Hartwell, probate attorney, looked unremarkable, just a brass plaque and a glass door smudged with fingerprints, but inside, the air was thick with the weight of finality. David greeted me with kind eyes that didn't soften the gravity of what he carried. He handed me a thick envelope sealed with Blaine's handwriting. My hands trembled as I broke it open, the familiar script leaping from the page. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I hired a private investigator. I know now that Nola's been cutting you off from me for years. Fake messages, canceled plans, excuses you never questioned. You never lost me. Mom." She made it look that way. "I changed my will. Everything is yours now, but more than the money. I'm leaving you the choice of what happens to her. Justice, not revenge. That's what I ask of you." The words blurred through my tears. Relief and heartbreak collided, twisting deep inside my chest. My son hadn't turned his back on me. He'd known. He had fought, even in silence, to leave me the truth. David cleared his throat gently. He also left documentation from the investigator, records, phone logs, copies of messages. It's thorough. He slid a second folder toward me, heavy with proof. I clutched the letter, unable to let go. My boy had seen through the lies in the end. He had trusted me with the last, most impossible task, to hold his wife accountable, but not to destroy her. The weight of that responsibility pressed down harder than any grief. I had in my hands the power to dismantle Nola completely or to choose another path. My tears soaked the ink as I whispered into the quiet office. "Oh, Blaine, what am I supposed to do with this?" And for the first time since his death, I felt my son close, not as a memory fading, but as a voice guiding me forward. Back in my kitchen, I couldn't shake the last line of Blaine's letter. "Mom, look inside the recipe tin." My hands trembled as I reached to the top shelf, pulling down the battered metal box where I'd once kept stained recipe cards and his old school notes. The lid creaked open, and tucked beneath a pile of yellowed index cards was a flash drive and a small brass key attached to a tag stamped with the number of a dockside locker. I slid the USB into my laptop, and a folder of audio files appeared. My pulse raced as I clicked the first one. Nola's voice cut through, sharp and deliberate. "This is Blaine's wife. I'm speaking on his behalf. Please stop calling his mother. She doesn't need to be disturbed." My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. The next recording was even worse. A hospice worker's voice, reading notes into a recorder. "Patient requested visit from mother and priest before scheduled surgery. Request marked pending. Deferred per spouse's instructions." I pressed both hands against my face, rocking in my chair. He had wanted me there. He had asked for me, and she had stopped it. The last chance I would ever have to sit at my son's bedside had been stolen, locked away by her lies. The next morning, David called with news that made my blood boil. Nola had filed a restraining order, accusing me of harassment, an attempt to keep me out of probate court altogether. But David had uncovered something damning: Blaine's signature on a financial power of attorney, executed while he was sedated. "She pushed this through while he was under anesthesia," David explained. "It won't hold." That evening, my phone rang again. Nola's voice was subdued, almost brittle. She asked me to meet her at the house. Against every instinct, I went. The living room was dim, the curtains drawn, the air stale with neglect. She sat hunched, her hands twisting a coffee mug as though it were the only thing keeping her grounded. "I wasn't always like this," she began, staring into the steam. She told me about Marcus, the fiancé who had left her after his mother branded her unworthy. She admitted that betrayal had hardened into a vow. Never again would she let a mother take a son from her. Her eyes darted up, wide with fear. "Blaine found out," she whispered. "He knew. He told me he was leaving. He was going to call you after the surgery. He said he couldn't stay married to someone who'd kept him from his own mother." I sat back, the weight of her confession crushing the air from the room. Blaine had been ready to break free. He had been ready to come back to me. But death had gotten there first. Back in my kitchen, the letter from Blaine still trembling in my hands, I remembered the last line he had written. "Mom, look inside the recipe tin." My stomach tightened. That battered tin had been sitting above the cupboards for years, filled with grease-stained recipe cards and scraps of his old homework I'd tucked away. I climbed onto a stool, reached up, and pulled it down. The lid popped off with a faint squeak. Nestled between folded index cards was a small USB drive and a brass key taped to a slip of paper with the words "Locker 14, Harbor," scrawled in Blaine's handwriting. My throat tightened as I plugged the USB into my laptop. The screen filled with audio files, each labeled with a date. With shaking hands, I clicked the first. Nola's voice rang out, clear and businesslike. "This is Mrs. Vale. I'm speaking on behalf of my husband. Please stop calling his mother. She doesn't want to be disturbed." My blood ran cold. Another file was a staff note from the hospice. Patient requested visit from mother and chaplain. Request deferred by spouse. I clutched the edge of the table, my heart hammering. My son had begged to see me. He had wanted to pray with me before his final surgery, and she had stopped him. The recordings blurred into static as my tears spilled over. I had thought the greatest cruelty was being excluded from his funeral. Now I knew the truth. I had been deliberately shut out from his very last moments alive. The chance to hold his hand, to whisper a goodbye, had been stolen forever. The next day, David called. His voice carried a tight edge. "Lucinda, Nola has filed a restraining order against you. She claims harassment." For a moment, I saw red. My fists clenched, but I forced myself to breathe. David shuffled through papers. "There's more. We found documents. Nola pushed Blaine into signing a financial power of attorney while he was under sedation. Legally, it's questionable at best." The room spun again, this time with fury. She had stripped him of dignity, of his own choices, and now she was trying to muzzle me with the courts. That evening, my phone rang again. It was her. "Please meet me." Nola's voice cracked. Against my better judgment, I went. Her house was stripped of its perfection. Papers littered the counters. She looked pale. Her hair pulled back carelessly. Her eyes darted as she confessed, words tumbling out like stones. "Years ago, I was engaged. His mother hated me. She tore us apart, made him call off the wedding. I swore I'd never let another mother take a man from me again." She swallowed hard, her hands trembling. "That's why I did it. Why I lied. Why I kept Blaine away." I stared at her, stunned by the twisted logic. She wiped her eyes with shaking fingers. But Blaine knew. He told me he couldn't stay married to someone who stole his mother from him. He was going to leave me. After the surgery. The room went still. My breath caught in my throat. Blaine had been ready to break free, to tell me everything. He had been planning a future where he and I could rebuild what we lost. And then he was gone, before he could take that step. I walked out of her house with the weight of that truth pressing hard against my chest. Blaine had uncovered the lies, but he had run out of time. Now the choice and the burden was mine. David's office was small, lined with shelves of leather-bound books that seemed to absorb the tension in the room. The air was so heavy it felt like it could snap. I sat across from Nola, my hands gripping Blaine's letter so tightly the paper threatened to tear. David positioned himself between us, his calm voice attempting to mask the storm he knew was about to break. On the polished desk lay everything: the USB drive, the legal documents, the revised will, and the envelope Blaine had written to me in his final weeks. Artifacts of truth, artifacts of betrayal. David slid the laptop forward. "Mrs. Vale," he said gently, "you may want to begin." With trembling fingers, I opened the first recording. Nola's voice filled the room, sharp and authoritative. "This is Mrs. Vale. I'm speaking on behalf of my husband. Please do not contact his mother. She doesn't wish to be disturbed." The sound of her words ripped through me. Nola let out a strangled gasp, her shoulders hunched as though the weight of her own lies had suddenly become unbearable. She pressed both hands to her face and began to sob. "Stop it," she whispered, her voice muffled. Then louder, Yes, it's true." I cut her off. I wrote the messages. I deleted the emails. I even told Blaine not to go when you were in the hospital. I didn't want you to have him the way I never did. I thought if I could keep you away, he'd finally be mine. Her confession hung in the air like smoke. The ticking of David's desk clock became deafening. I felt my throat tighten as I looked down at Blaine's handwriting, the words he had left for me. Justice, not revenge. Every part of me ached to strike back, to make her feel the years of isolation, the birthdays missed, the hospital nights endured alone. I could strip her of everything, her home, her security, her very sense of place in the world. With a few signatures, I could watch her unravel the way she had watched me break, piece by piece. But in the same moment, I could almost hear Blaine's voice. The boy who once reached for my hand as he crossed the street, the man who trusted me with the burden of his last request. He hadn't left me power so I could destroy her. He had left me power so I could choose. Nola lifted her head. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks, eyes hollow with fear. "Please," she choked. "I don't deserve your mercy, I know that. But don't leave me with nothing. I loved him. God help me. I loved him in my own broken way." I stared at her, my pulse hammering in my ears. The office felt smaller by the second, the walls closing in on the choice I had no escape from. Revenge promised a dark, fleeting satisfaction. Justice, real justice, demanded more of me than anger. David folded his hands, watching me closely but saying nothing. It was not his decision to make. It was mine. Blaine's voice echoed in my memory again. Justice, not revenge. And in that suffocating office, with every truth laid bare, I understood. My next words would decide not only Nola's fate, but the legacy my son had trusted me to carry forward. The silence in David's office was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of traffic outside the window. My fingers tightened around Blaine's letter until the edges cut into my skin. I steadied my breath, lifted my chin, and locked eyes with Nola. Her face was streaked with tears, her whole body trembling as if she already knew what was coming. I spoke slowly, each word deliberate, carrying the weight of years stolen from me. "The house by the harbor, you can keep it. That roof will not be taken from you." Nola's head jerked up, eyes widening in disbelief. I didn't let her speak. "But every cent of his savings, every dollar of the life insurance will go into a foundation, the Blaine Harbor Fund. It will help children and grandparents who've been torn apart by lies and selfishness. It will give them the time we never got back." Her lips parted, but no sound came. The tears on her face caught the light like salt on glass. David cleared his throat softly and slid a folder across the desk. "If you're ready, Mrs. Vale," he murmured. The weight of the decision seemed to reverberate in the air between us. I placed my hand on the folder, but my gaze never left Nola. "You'll sign a full admission of what you did," I continued. "Every deception, every message you forged, every visit you blocked. Your lies will be written in black and white, and if you ever try to rewrite the truth again, that statement will come to light." My voice didn't rise, but it cut sharper than any shout. Nola nodded quickly, her hands shaking. I'll sign whatever you ask." "And more than words," I said, leaning forward, "you'll act. You will enter therapy for no less than 1 year. Real therapy, not empty sessions. You will face yourself the way Blaine faced the truth before he died. And every year, you will give 100 hours of service at the hospice. Not for me, not for appearances, but to look into the eyes of families who deserve the chance you stole from us." Her composure collapsed. She bent forward, sobbing into her hands, shoulders shaking. "I don't deserve this mercy," she gasped. "I don't deserve anything you've given me. But thank you for not destroying me." My throat tightened, but I kept my face steady. "Don't thank me," I said quietly. "Thank Blaine. He was the one who still wanted you to have a chance at redemption. I am only honoring his wish." Her sobs quieted into soft hiccups as David pushed the papers in front of her. The pen clattered against the wood as she gripped it, her hand trembling violently. Line after line, her name appeared, binding her to the truth she had tried so long to erase. I watched her as she wrote, my heart torn between pity and fury. This wasn't forgiveness, not yet. Perhaps not ever. But it wasn't vengeance either. I thought of Blaine's words, still echoing in my mind. Justice, not revenge. When the last signature was complete, Nola lowered the pen with a shudder. She raised her eyes to mine, red-rimmed, raw. "You could have ruined me. You could have left me with nothing. Why didn't you?" I folded Blaine's letter gently, tucking it back into my purse. "Because my son loved you once, and because he believed mercy could stand where hatred falls. I won't honor your lies, Nola, but I will honor his heart." David gathered the documents, his expression somber but resolute. "It's settled," he said. But the truth was, nothing was settled. The papers, the signatures, the conditions, those were only the beginning of a reckoning that would take years. As I rose from the chair, my knees felt weak, but not from despair. For the first time since Blaine's death, I stood taller, not as a victim of someone else's deception, but as the guardian of his final wish. And in that moment, I understood the burden he had placed on me. Mercy was heavier than revenge. It required more strength to hold back than to strike. But as I looked at Nola's tear-streaked face, I knew Blaine had been right. This was the justice he wanted, the kind that didn't destroy, but demanded truth and change, the kind that left scars visible, so they could never be denied again. 6 months later, the air along the waterfront carried the bite of early spring, sharp enough to sting my cheeks but softened by the sun breaking through pale clouds. I sat on the stone bench, engraved with my son's name, Blaine's Bench, and let the silence of the harbor wrap around me. The gulls wheeled overhead, the waves lapped against the pier, and from the awning of a bait shop down the street, a small set of wind chimes sang with every gust of salty air. The sound tugged at something deep inside me. For a moment, I could almost hear him again, Blaine as a little boy, running across the sand with scraped knees and bright eyes, turning back to me with that grin that melted everything hard in the world. "Don't worry, Mom. I'm fine." A passing breeze carried the scent of salt and blooming grass, stirring the hydrangeas I had brought with me. Their blue petals shivered in my hands, delicate and strong all at once. I placed them gently on the bench, a ritual that had become as much about remembering as it was about surviving. That morning's mail had included a plain envelope, her handwriting shaky but unmistakable. Inside was a photograph of Blaine I had never seen before. He was in the garden, sunlight slanting across his face, laughter caught mid-burst as if someone had told him a joke just out of frame. On the back, in ink that bled slightly from the pressure of her pen, were the words, "I am learning how to love without controlling. Thank you for showing me what that means." I turned the picture over again and again, searching his smile for pieces of the boy I raised, the man he became, the son who had left me the hardest gift of all, a choice. My eyes stung, but for the first time in a long while, the tears weren't only grief. They were something lighter, something closer to peace. The quarterly report from the Blaine Harbor Fund sat folded in my bag. I had read it earlier, my hands trembling with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Already, dozens of families had received help, grandparents reunited with grandchildren, legal aid provided for visitation rights, therapy sessions offered to bridge wounds carved by silence and manipulation. Every page carried echoes of what Blaine had been denied, of what I had been denied, but also the possibility that someone else wouldn't have to suffer in the same way. As I closed my eyes, I thought of the families sitting together again, of children's laughter bridging divides, of grandparents' hands holding little ones who finally knew their love. My son's absence had carved a hollow in me, but his name now stood for something greater than loss. His legacy was no longer confined to stone or photographs. It was alive, moving, changing lives. The harbor bells rang from the church tower behind me, their chime carried out to sea. I let the sound wash over me. Steady and resolute, I whispered into the wind, "You are still my pride, my joy. Nothing changes that." The petals of the hydrangeas fluttered against the engraved letters of his name, a fleeting kiss of blue against gray stone. I traced the curve of each letter with my fingertips, letting the weight of the months fall away. I had lost my son. Yes. But I had gained the truth of his love, the restoration of my place in his story, and a living legacy that bore his name. It was not the ending I had ever wanted, but it was the ending I could live with, the ending he entrusted me to carry. And as the wind chimes sang again above the harbor, I felt him near, not as absence, but as presence. Not gone, not erased, alive in memory, in mercy, in every act of justice that bore his name. Alive in me,